For this slide session, I would like to give a brief overview of some historical moments in virtual reality. And please note that this is by no means a complete or detailed overview. It's just a very brief overview of just to put things into a more kind of broad perspective about the history of virtual reality. And it's actually hard to place the beginning of virtual reality in history. So the idea of creating imaginary worlds, if you think about it, this is as old as humanity itself. So, and that's the essence of virtual reality, creating an imagined world that somehow other people can be immersed in. And even the expression virtual reality, it's hard to know precisely when it was first used. There have been uses of this expression virtual reality in books even before there were computers that were capable of simulating these graphical virtual environments. So I'll just go through a small number of devices, of moments in time in the recent history that are relevant to the current state of virtual reality that we have today. And I start with Cinerama. I start with Cinerama because the movie industry has always been a driver for immersive experiences. If you think about it, when you go to a movie theater, the idea, the aim of the people that built the theater is to give an immersive experience, to put you in a place where you forget about your real world and you enter, you are immersed in the story of the movie. And the Cinerama was a movie theater with an immersive experience, or at least more immersive than traditional flat screen theaters, that use 3 projectors to project onto a curved screen that you can see there in the picture. And so that people sitting roughly in the center of that room would have their field of view almost completely filled by the screen. So it was immersive in that sense. Almost everything that you saw when you were sitting there was the screen, the movie screen, so that all you could see was the story of the movie. And you can see that this was a very old technology. So this was developed in 1950s. At the time, it was kind of the answer of the movie theater, the movie industry to the TV. So the TV had just appeared. It was driving people out of movie theaters because they could just watch TV at home. And so the movie industry had to fight back and create a new, a more rich experience for people that were willing to go to the movie theater. And it was based, as you can see, on 3 projectors in order to fill that very large screen. But in the end, it didn't have much success because it was hard to film. You had to film also with special cameras. And it was hard to project. So imagine, instead of having to project 1 movie, in essence, you had to project 3. And it was hard to synchronize everything. It was expensive. So eventually it died. So it wasn't pursued. Just an experience in a moment in time in a few theaters in the United States. Another example, a few years later, is the Sensorama. And this is a very interesting machine. It was inspired by the Cinerama. And Morten Heilig So he was an inventor. He created a personal use machine for experiencing stereoscopic movies. And the machine had also the possibility of producing smell, stereo sound, and even haptic sensations. So you could feel vibrations on the seat, and you could feel the wind in your hair. Otherwise it wasn't interactive. So users still had a passive experience, like in the movie theater, but it was much more immersive, and it was much richer, a much richer experience. As you can see that in the picture, people would need to put their heads inside the machine, and so everything they saw and everything they hear was the movie. It was, as you can see, it was invented in the 60s, so a few years after Cinerama. And this was even before we had computers with graphical interfaces. So this is before virtual reality with computers. And I'll just show you a small part of the movie. If I could just get to the link that's behind this. I won't show you the complete video. I'll just scroll a bit. This is an interview with the inventor of this machine.
Okay, yeah, just. When you get in it, you go and you put it. I see. Yeah, I see. I understand. Let's just make it handy. Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop here. I just wanted to show you a bit more details of the machine with a real person like sitting on the machine, and you can see that it works kind of like an arcade gaming machine. So people sit down at the machine. They have they can insert coins to make it work, and then to select a movie, etc. And it's a personal use, for personal use. There in the video, the person that was using the machine was actually the inventor of the machine. He's still alive, and it's in his backyard at his home. This machine eventually, he made a few prototypes. It was actually made public, so it was experienced in some shopping centers, I believe, in the United States. But eventually, he was unable to find someone willing to fund his research and to turn this into a commercial product. So eventually it also died off. It was an experience that didn't have much consequence. Another example is this first headset, the first virtual reality headset by Sutherland. And This is a key moment in virtual reality history because it's, I think, the first example of something that resembles virtual reality made with a computer. So this was about in late 60s, about 1968, where this person, even Sutherland, which is actually the father of interactive computer graphics. So he invented much of the things that we use today in our desktops, much of the interactions that we have with computers right now was actually invented by him. So he's generally considered the father of computer graphics. And late in the 60s, he also created what is usually called the Sword of Damocles. And it's called this way because you can see it in the picture. This is the virtual reality headset that he created, and it's hanging on the ceiling. It's hard to see here, but it's something that hangs from the ceiling. And because of that, it's called the Sword of Damocles. You can search this online to understand what it means. So this is basically the first headset. I'll show you the one of the videos, the second video in a moment. It's a very short one, and you'll see that it was very, very basic, very, very simple graphics. But it was the first time that computer graphics responded to the movements of a person's head. So I'll just show you this second video. It's a very, very low quality video, just 30 seconds. As you can see, the video is very old, so very low quality. And you can also see that the graphics that he was seeing was just basically a wireframe of a cube. But you notice that the perspective of that wireframe changed as he changed the orientation of his head. So this was the first time that a computer generated this kind of graphics. So remember that this was in '68. At this time, there were no personal computers like the ones we use today, much less graphical computers. So this was like a key moment. Another example, so another moment in time that it's somehow related and relevant for virtual reality is this VideoPlace system. It was created by Myron Kruger, which is an American artist that was interested in the creation of interactive computer graphics that responded to human body gestures. So instead of using a keyboard and a mouse, he was interested in creating systems, visual graphical systems that responded to natural user gestures. And so his work was mostly displayed in a projection screen in front of the user or on a table. But it kind of paved the way to natural gestural interaction with computer graphics. And he called these digital environments that he created, so these experiences, these interactive experiences, he called this artificial reality. And you can see that in the picture. I won't show you the video, although you can then later on check that video. It's also rather short. You can see here in the picture that these are the silhouettes of the hands of a user, and this is the silhouette of the body of another user that was somehow captured by by cameras connected to the computer. And this allowed so people to interact with each other, or at least parts of their bodies to interact digitally through this graphical interface. And this was, so he created VideoPlace in the 70s and early 80s. Another landmark is the use of gloves to interact inside virtual environments. And NASA, so the American Space Agency, had a lot of work in virtual reality, including this virtual environment workstation that included interaction inside the virtual environment with what was called at the time data gloves. So special gloves that sense the position of the user's hands and their fingers, and that allowed people to interact with virtual objects inside that environment. I'll show you the video. It's a short video. Also very old, very low quality.
Flying enabled.
So you could see that in the video that the person was wearing a headset, a virtual reality headset, much like the ones we have today. Although this was quite a few years ago, so also in the 1980s. And they had a glove that was tracked, and you can see there in the picture the representation of the user's hand. Now it's also obvious the low quality of the computer graphics, because at the time computers did not have much graphical computing power. Another interesting example is the Aspen Movie Map. This one is from the late 70s, and this is a kind of precursor to Google Street View that we have today. And basically, this allowed what they called surrogate travel, so like a form of telepresence. But again, remember, I'll show you part of the video clip. Remember that this was before the 80s, this was before personal computers, a long time before Google Street View.
DJ Sardi.
Okay, I'll stop the video here. The rest of the video clip just shows more of his interactions with the system. And again, this is an important reference, particularly for this form of telepresence, as we discussed yesterday. It's also a very cool demo. You don't see people smoking pipes and doing computer demos these days. It's a very interesting way of demonstrating a computer program. Another example, now we're moving forward in time. This is about in the 80s, and VPL was a company. This is an interesting example because it was one of the first companies that were dedicated to virtual reality. So VPL was founded in '84 by Jaron Lanier, and this company sold virtual reality headsets. So they were a commercial company. You could buy a virtual reality headset from them. They sold gloves, and they even created a full body suit that you can see there in the picture. So the full body suit allowed you to have a representation of your body inside the virtual environment and allowed your avatar to mimic your physical movements. So it was also a key moment in the history of virtual reality. Eventually, this company went bankrupt, so they closed because at this time in the early 90s, virtual reality started to fade away. The interest in virtual reality started to fade away. And it started to fade away because, as you saw in the examples, the computer graphics were not very good. The hardware was not very good. The quality of the tracking, the quality of the generated computer graphics, they weren't very good. So your experience inside this virtual reality experience at the time were not very good, mostly because of the hardware. So what happened was many years later, in 2012, there was a Kickstarter campaign to create a new virtual reality headset, the Oculus Rift, which you probably all heard about. And actually, this Kickstarter campaign eventually gave rise to a new wave of interest in virtual reality that we are still currently going through. And why did the Rift appear at this time, in this moment in time? Mostly because of the smartphone industry. Because the smartphone industry pushed the quality of the hardware to a point where it's now feasible and it's now cheap enough to produce virtual reality headsets. So we have displays which are small enough with enough quality to be used in a virtual reality headset. And so this eventually gave rise to a number of different virtual reality devices that we will go through in just a moment. But so this was a very, just to summarize, this was a very, very short overview of virtual reality of some of the moments. Again, it's not complete, it's not a complete overview. There are lots more that could be said about historical moments in virtual reality. a lot more people that could have been mentioned. And I suggest that you read again those chapters from Laval and Sherman and Craig, and they give a more broad overview of this, the history of virtual reality.